Now we're live.
Well, hey, Tommy, it's good to be with you and my brother from across the big pond.
It's an honour for me to be sat with you, Colonel Alan West. I was speaking to you earlier, just to make other people aware. I was watching a speech in 2010 of the American Freedom Initiative. It was with an event with Pamela Geller, and you gave a speech there. And I first become awakened to the threats of Islam, when I first started talking about them in 2009. And obviously I was learning. I was like a sponge. I was listening and learning to everyone. And I listened to your speech that day, and it helped shape a lot of my worldview. It didn't just help me, it educated me as well. It helped me learn and understand. You separated Muslims straight away. You separated Muslims. You spoke of the great Muslims you've met, which the difficult thing for me growing up, where I grew up in a town that has a 50% Muslim population. And some of the best people I've met and some of the people I love have been Muslim.
Yeah.
But here's this problem. So how do I confront this problem? How do we talk about it? How do I understand? And that was my problem of understanding it. And I listened to your speech that day about the 1400-year war and about how if hate speech has now become the truth, then they might as well lock you up. I listened to all of it. And it helped. It was an inspiration to me, that speech was. So I appreciate you and thank you for it.
No, it's my honor and pleasure, and I think that that's the thing that people have to start doing is doing their research and their studying to understand the ideologies that we are up against and not the individuals that we're fighting. And it's just the same as what we see happening here in the United States of America. It is less about Republican and Democrat. It's less about the political party. It's about the philosophy of governance, the interaction and the interrelation between the individual citizen and the institution of government. And when you read, our Declaration of Independence, when you read our founding documents, the Constitution, the individual is preeminent over the institution of government here. That's how we were established. That's why, we have one of the longest running constitutional republics the world has ever known. But what I see happening is that the statist, progressive, socialist, Marxist, even communist philosophy of governance has taken root into the United States of America. And you see the rights and freedoms and liberties of the individual just being squashed. And so we've got to talk about these things. We've got to stand up about it. And I know one of the big issues that, I see as I run for governor here of Texas and travel across the state, people are concerned about the border and the fact that the federal government that we have here, the Biden administration, is in complete violation of the Constitution. It's Article 4, Section 4 of our Constitution, which is called the Guarantee Clause. And the two things that the federal government is supposed to guarantee to every state in this union is a Republican form of government, not Republican Party, but based upon being a constitutional republic and the rule of law and respect of the individual, and then also protect every state from invasion. And we're here at the tip of the spear, the front lines in Texas. We have a 1,254-mile border with a country called Mexico, but yet the provinces that border us in Texas are not controlled by the Mexican government. It's controlled by these transnational narco-criminal terrorist organizations called the cartels. And it's having an incredible effect on us here in Texas. And I know that the preeminent issue that you and I want to discuss today is the human and sex trafficking. And I live in the state that is the number one state in the United States of America for human and sex trafficking. And much of it has to do with the fact that the Biden administration has come in and implemented an open borders policy, and the cartels and others are willingly taking advantage of that.
And you say, how worse has it got under Biden?
Incredibly worse. I mean, I think the highest numbers that you saw border crossings during the previous administration, the Trump administration, was about 19 to 20,000. In the month of December, we had 178,000 illegal crossings, and those are the people that we know. And then last year, that number was close to 3 million, because you have the folks that are coming across that quote unquote we apprehend, which means they just get released. But then they have this other number of people that are called the getaways. Those are the people that you see on news clips that when a vehicle gets stopped, they're running, or you see them in video surveillance systems and things of that nature. That number is close to 600,000. That's a modest estimate. So I live right outside Dallas, Texas. The population here is about 1.7 million for the city of Dallas proper. And you're talking about close to 3 million people have come in illegally in just 1 year.
You see,
Yeah, go ahead,
you see,
Tommy.
when I hear that, I look at your last elections and I look at how close it was without the fraud. I look at how close it was. And 3 million people who are going to be eligible to vote under the Biden's new rules.
Yes, that's one of the things they're upset about the Voting Rights Act, because it says that there's no picture ID to vote in America. There's no voter registration roll review in America. That unsolicited mail out ballots, that's how we're going to do our voting. Online voter registration, same day voting, same day voter registration, and illegals get to vote. And as a matter of fact, our largest city in the United States of America is New York City. And Mayor Bill de Blasio, one of the things that he did on his way out was say that illegals could vote in New York City municipal elections.
So and I think without needing to ask the question, who are those illegals going to vote for?
Well, they're going to vote for the people that promise them the most benefits. There was a great Scottish political philosopher, Alexander Fraser Tytler. That's exactly what he said, that a democracy cannot last as a permanent form of government. It can only last until that time when the voters realize they can vote their own largesse from the public treasury. And from that moment on, you will see the collapse of democracy over loose fiscal policy, followed by a dictatorship. That's where we're headed. And so when you hear the Democrats out there, progressive socialists, I prefer to call them, promising free education benefits, free medical benefits, everything that you want, paying you not to go to work, to stay at home. This is how you build up that voter base that is going to continue to vote for their own benefits out of the public treasury.
See, it sounds very similar to what we've seen in the United Kingdom, but we saw it over a 20 to 30 year period. The figures you're talking about are over 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
How close do you think, like that battle for America, if it's not won? I've sat, as I watch your election, I thought, if the Republicans don't get voted back in this next election, they may never win an election again.
Well, it's going to be very hard at the federal level.
With the replacement of voters, that's the biggest thing. When you look at 3, 4, 5, 6 million people being brought in, they'll outnumber the voters. And also, you're running for Texas. What about, as I'm looking at America and I look at failed places like California, they're failed because of the policies, the socialist policies. They've gone the rise in criminality, all of these problems. But then you have all the people who are running away. Yeah, they're running away and they're running to Republican areas. But do they bring their politics with them? Because in a lot of the cases, I've seen that they do. So you'll have many people coming in who are running away from these crime-ridden areas, from these failed states. But when it comes to election, will they again vote Democrat?
Well, it's very interesting because we see that happening here in the state of Texas without a doubt. And one of the strategic imperatives of the left is they come in and they flood successful red states in our major population centers because you don't have that large generation of population out in the rural areas, and it becomes a numbers game. Remember, California used to be a red state. California gave us a governor who became president by the name of Ronald Reagan. But I don't think Ronald Reagan could be governor of California today. But there are two types of people that are leaving these states, not just California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and a lot of the Northeast states. The people that are making that decision individually, Tommy, they understand it. They get it. They're tired of those policies, the failures. They come to a state like Texas, and they want to be in a strong constitutional conservative state. Like many of them say, they want to be in a place where their vote counts. It means something. But then when you have governors that are going out and recruiting businesses from these failed states, saying that, come to Texas, our economy is great, our policies are great, you can thrive here with your business. And these businesses say, yeah, you're right, because it sucks here in California, it sucks in Illinois, New York, New Jersey, the taxes, everything's killing me. But they don't talk to their employment base. They don't tell their employees that the reason why I'm bugging out of here is because I can't thrive. I can't continue on to have a successful business. And that's going to affect you in the long run. So when you pick up and move this employment base who may have liked it where they were, then they come here and they're saying, well, where are the Democrats? Where are the leftists? Who are the people I can vote for? And so the biggest reflection of that is down in Austin, Texas, which is the capital of Texas. And now Austin, Texas because you have local leadership that defunded the police by millions of dollars. And so Austin, Texas now is the #3 city for increase of murder in the United States of America.
Mad, mate, mad. And that's the most scary thing for us sitting here. For us, for me, sat here as I watch it all, and I've watched what's happening in the United States, because we know the same problems we have here, but they've always managed to keep my politics as a fringe voice in the United Kingdom. Whereas in the United States, there's many influential people who speak out on the same issues as me. One of the main issues I'm known for speaking about is child exploitation. And what we see, the figures we see in the United Kingdom, we see that the Muslim population, the male Muslim population, make up 2% of the United Kingdom's population, but they're responsible for 90% of the arrests when it comes to specific gang grooming of children and rape. One of the issues which I've been massively criticised for, and that differs me from many of the others, is I try to look at the reason why. We have had Sikh immigration into the UK. They have not raped our daughters at this level. We've had Hindu immigration. They have not raped our daughters at this level. Jewish immigration have not raped our daughters. This is specifically an Islamic problem from members of the Islamic community. Of course, it's not all of them. But in the most recent town, I made a film that was premiered this weekend called The Rape of Britain. In that town, there is a 1.7% Muslim population, which means there's about 3,500 Muslims. When you take away the women, take away the under 16s and take away the over 60s or 70s, there's approximately 1,000 men. The police investigation identified 20% of the men. It identified 200 men. The independent inquiries identified nearly 350. So between 20 and 35% of the men in that town have been raping children. Would you have any mindset, with your knowledge of Islam and its history and its founder, as to why a percentage of this community are acting differently to every other community when it comes to raping children who are not Muslim?
Well, again, if you study the history, and Muhammad's married to Aisha, who she was just 6 years old, I believe, when they were married, and then the marriage was consummated when she was 9. And then you read the traditions of Muhammad. For whatever reason, that's part of the Islamic male belief system. And again, this is not talking about Muslims overall. This is talking about an ideology and a fundamental principle that they have not sought to reform. And we have seen that happening here in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, just last week, we had an Afghan gentleman that was, child sex abuse. And so we're starting to see that. I don't have any problems with the interpreters and translators that I worked with 2.5 years in Afghanistan, and their families, getting them out of a deplorable situation, because they're going to be killed. But when we put the wide net out there and we just allowed everyone to come, we've got to make sure that people understand our principles and values. And you see this happening in a lot of these closed communities. And in many cases, I know in the UK, you don't have a lot of police activity that are going in and patrolling in these communities. And they're allowing these communities to establish Sharia law and not operate under English common law. And even here in Texas, we had that confrontation where in Irving, Texas, they tried to have an alternative system of law. And a very strong mayor by the name of Beth Van Dye, who is now a United States Congresswoman, she pushed back against that. So, yes, we have to identify, and we have to just go with the facts, go with truth, and say that we have an issue here. And here in the United States of America, when we see this open border, the cartels are bringing across single military-aged males and females, and they're going into this sex trafficking industry. Houston and Dallas are the top 2 cities. Texas, top 2 cities in Texas are the #2 1 and 2 cities for sex trafficking in the United States of America. So again, we have that issue here, and it's tied to a porous and open border.
It's hard to enforce an open border, but I remember always looking at the United States thinking that when I hear about the immigration from Mexico and the problems coming from Mexican immigration, I remember thinking, you haven't seen anything yet. Like when you see the level, when you see the crime wave that will come with the Afghanis, the Pakistanis, the Somalis, the Islamic immigration. I'm not saying you haven't seen anything yet to downplay the problems that have been caused, but I'm on about the level of the integration and assimilation and the ghettoization. And as you said, entire communities creating Islamic enclaves that are governed by Sharia. And what comes with that, which we've witnessed has come with that, is a total inability to deal with it, to tackle it, or to even talk about it, to even talk about the problems of Sharia, to even talk about the oppression, to talk about any of it. It's become a taboo. And it's become such a taboo, which is the hardest thing for people to get their head around, is that our police leaders, our government leaders, all of them were fully aware that an entire generation of England's daughters was being kidnapped, raped and groomed, murdered. The city I've just done my film on, 5 females are now dead at the hands of these gangs, okay? But the police were all fully aware. The government reports, when we first started talking about this, I started talking about this in 2009, and we were labelled as scaremongers, fearmongers, and conspiracy theorists, etc. Since then, where we've carried on shouting and carried on screaming, there's now been investigations and government investigations, and they've been forced to look at this problem. And what's come out of it is that they all knew, but they let it happen because they didn't want to be called racist.
Yes.
Now that when you actually say that out loud, people ask, how powerful is political correctness? It's that powerful. It's powerful enough to make grown men and women who are in positions of power do absolutely nothing through fear of what words may be labelled towards them. They may be put into this category. So they would rather allow and continue to allow young children to be butchered, to be tortured, to be sacrificed, because they were just scared of tackling it. Now, for me, grooming and the rape of children is one issue that we've witnessed in the UK. But actually, every single problem that comes from the Islamic community is treated like this, whether it be female genital mutilation.
Yes.
And the reason for these problems being hidden, the reasons for them being tackled, is because these problems are the reality of open border policy. These problems are the reality. And whilst you want to continue opening our borders, but yours at an astronomical level, but whilst you continue wanting to be letting people in, you have hid and continue to hide the reality of the situation on the ground for the men and women in your country who are going to be living in these towns and cities where you're relocating tens, if not hundreds of thousands of fighting age young Muslim males.
Yeah, one of the things that I always tell people is that when tolerance becomes a one-way street, it leads to cultural suicide. And that's what you're talking about. I mean, we are told that we have to be tolerant of something that is completely anathema to who we are and our principles and values here in Western democratic society. And of course, if you speak out, like you said, you're getting called, all these different names. And one of the names that has popped up is Islamophobia. And so that just drives people into a point where they don't want to say anything. Look, we have these issues already up in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, Minnesota, with the large Somali Muslim population there. And that's one of the hotbeds of Islamic jihadism. And you can see that's reflected in a young woman who is a congressional representative from there. That's Representative Ilhan Omar. You look at what is happening over in Dearborn, Michigan, where you have another very large Islamic enclave, and look at who their representative, Rashida Tlaib, and look at some of the things that they say, look at some of the positions that they take. But yet when you speak out against these two individuals, and of course, Ilhan Omar, who said that on 9/11, some people did something, she couldn't even admit that this was Islamic terrorism, Islamic jihadism. And again, coming back to what we're talking about, we're not talking about all Muslims, we're talking about Islamofascism. We're talking about, principles that are not coherent and the antithesis of who we are in our democratic societies. I have 2 daughters, 28 and 25. And I tell you what, growing up, I was like a hawk, making sure that I protected them and kept them away from sexual predators. But we've got to do a better job, obviously, in the UK and definitely here in the United States of America. Texas is number 3 in the country for missing children. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had a 14-year-old Hispanic female that was abducted. And so we've got a problem here, and we've got to protect our young men and young women from this rape culture and this sex slavery culture. This is immoral, what we see happening.
What do you think? I think about from when I first started my activism, from when I first listened to your speech, are we in a better place now or a worse place?
No, I think we're in a worse place. And I think the reason why we're in a worse place is that a decade ago, we could have stood up and confronted these things and not acquiesce, appease, compromise, and try to negotiate or try to cower away from it. And now we see that we are really behind what we say in America. We're behind the 8 ball. And we've got to have courageous leaders to stand up and say, look, I'm not xenophobic. I'm not Islamophobic. I'm not a racist. I'm not a sexist. I'm not any of these things. I'm just speaking truth. And we got to protect our citizens. And I think we have to protect the least of these, which are our young boys and young girls.
And in the process of doing that, just so I know, in the United States with Silicon Valley, what's your opinion of them?
Well, I have a real problem with people that are violating our First Amendment, which is our freedom of speech. And they now become the arbiters of what is, rightful speech. It reminds me of George Orwell's novel, 1984. And I think that that's what we're living. You have a ministry of truth that is trying to be established. And I don't like these corporate woke fascist oligarchs, such as the Facebook, such as the Twitter, Meta, whatever they want to call themselves. And I think that's why it's so important that we get alternative means of communication, social media platforms, so that one person does not become the repository of information dissemination.
And that's it, because what can be done, because I've been in the UK, I've been invisible or made invisible for the last 2 years. Since I started having an influence, since I started causing a problem for them. I remember seeing some of my video views were getting 60 million views in 4 weeks. And I started awakening people to the reality of the situation living in towns like my hometown. And I was erased without committing any crime, never being taken to court, never going before a judge. I raised not just from little companies, but from, if you look at most people, where do they get their information from? It's now social media. Social media is the main platform for information, for where people get their news. So when you erase some of them there, you're taking them out of society, really. You're deleting them from society and giving them the opportunity. What could be done, do you think, to tackle? I know I've now got a home on Getter. That's my home of free speech in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm sitting waiting. I've been waiting for a long time for Donald Trump, because there's only certain people in a few people in a few positions of power that can actually do something. And for me, this is as important than any election, because once you have that platform where people can reach the public, because they're going to take away the Republicans' opportunity to even reach their voters if something's not done. So what can be done to really rein in big tech from controlling elections and dictating elections, interfering in elections?
Well, I think it's a two-part approach. From the public side of the house, you got to make sure that you're electing individuals that have the courage to stand up and hold these companies accountable. When you have the ability to make sure that they don't have, governmental protections and things of this nature, they don't have the ability to collude with certain political parties and things of that nature to suppress speech. That's what you have to do from the public side of the house, is elect those strong leaders that will make sure that they keep these folks in the right type of box and not allow them to have these monopolies. But then from the private side of the house, we have to look at innovation. We have to look at other means where we can create those new information platforms, such as Getter, and Gab is another one that popped up here. And I think that that's where President Trump can make a huge impact with this new Trump communications platform that he's trying to put together. And Devin Nunes, who I serve with in Congress, is going to be the new CEO there. So I think that's how we approach it. Citizens have a right and responsibility to report what is going on. But when you look at Ron DeSantis in Florida, they will suffer fines in the state of Florida. I think it was either North Dakota, South Dakota, where they said that people can come together and they can file class action lawsuits against these big tech companies that are suppressing their free speech. So that's how we have to tackle this. We have to tackle this from by electing the right type of representatives and legislators that can erode the power of these corporate oligarchs and the monopolies they're trying to establish. And then the other side, we have to come up and innovate and come up with the new social media platforms where our speech will not be squelched.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm praying for. I'm just waiting for Donald Trump. So give him a nudge.
All right, I'll do that.
Tell him that England's waiting, Britain's waiting.
You got it.
We're dying.
You got it.
But no, our problem. I'll keep all my eyes on America and all my eyes on your election. I've kept them on your country since I started my activism, to look to people, to listen and to learn. But so the situation in our country, we're in dire straits. On every level. So on the immigration level, we still have boatloads coming in, being brought in every single day. Every day. We elected a government where I thought Priti Patel was going to be strong, Boris Johnson was going to be strong. There's been a total failure on every part. So exactly the same again. We have a globalist government continuing the same failed problems that we've seen time and time again.
Well, that's what Albert Einstein said, the pure definition of insanity, to continue to do the exact same thing, think you're going to get different results. And again, I'll just harp on that the people have to rise up. There was a great quote from Benjamin Franklin on the day that our Constitution was signed, September 1787. A Philadelphia socialite, a woman by the name of Mrs. Powell, approached him and asked him a question that's pertinent to us today and probably pertinent to you all in the UK. And she said, well, Doctor, what is it that we have, a monarchy or a republic? And Franklin replied, a republic, if you can keep it. And I think it's so important that we have more activists like yourself, Tommy, to awaken the people of England. And also we have more folks that awaken the people here in the United States of America to stand up and protect our rights, freedoms, and liberties, because this is an ideological battle that we're in.
It's like the hardest point is getting most of our politicians to realize it's an ideological battle we're in.
Well, it's time to start electing statesmen and leaders and not politicians. And I think that's the key awakening. And that's really what you saw with President Trump. This is a guy who had never been in politics. He was a successful businessman, and he just came in and brought common sense. And the swamp, or whatever you want to call it, up in D.C., the establishment, they didn't want that there, being a Republican or a Democrat, because he exposed politicians for the failures that they are. And I think in many ways, that's the exact same thing that we're seeing here in Texas, is that people are tired of the same old status quo establishment politicians that are leaving their borders wide open, that are not doing anything to protect their children, the education issues that we have here, the medical freedom issues that we have here, the taxation issues that we have here. So folks are starving for leadership. And so let's raise up leaders and not politicians.
Great shout, mate. Well, if you get elected and there's any chance to get into the United States,
come on, man. Come on.
I'm desperate too. I'm desperate.
We'll take you down. We'll take you down, and we'll get you a new pair of cowboy boots and feed you some good Texas brisket.
Mate, I got an invite by 10 members of Congress, and then 45 politicians wrote to the American Embassy in London. And when I got there to get my visa, they blocked it. So the reason why I'm desperate is because I believe I come to America in 2009, 2010, and I come to give the United States a warning. I can give the living example of what it's like. When I was born in 1982 in my hometown, we had one mosque. We now have over 40. I can tell you what that looks like. I can tell you how it works. I can tell you the attack on your freedom. I can tell you how the government or the local council, the police will all pander and work with them whilst they're doing it. And actually not just work with them, but celebrate. We're also supposed to celebrate this diversity whilst we're seeing an attack on our freedom, our culture, and our way of life. So if I ever get into the United States, Colonel Allen West, I'll definitely be wanting a hookup.
All right. Now I'll grill you a steak here at my house. And always remember, Tommy, that when tolerance becomes a one-way street, it leads to cultural suicide. And that's what you're talking about, and that's what you're trying to prevent. So God bless you, and I appreciate all of your efforts. And I look forward to chatting with you and look forward to meeting you personally.
Thank you. And best of luck with your election.
Thanks, Tommy.
Cheers,
all
man.
Right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Cheers.